On this 18th annual Day of Remembrance, we unite with honor for our second virtual ceremony. As young and old remember our lost centurions, we wait and pray that our cherished safety and freedom will be restored. We join hands and hearts now strong and secure, rather than sad and grieving, in knowing that our heroes died doing what they loved. We renew our pride and trust in how they lived, and we treasure life with the same courage and strength of those that we honor. May their sacrifices become our living inspiration, because they did more for the oath they believed in than anybody should.
Oh, sweet, can you see by the dawn's early light, once so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets rang upon bursting in air, came through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Since 1896, 87 members of Special Operations assigned to the former Tactical Patrol Force, the former Street Crime Unit, the Aviation Unit, the Strategic Response Group, the Harbor Unit, the Mounted Unit, and the Emergency Service Unit sacrificed their lives in responding to 51 incidents of law enforcement's unique and essential mission, the protection of all life and property. From 1959 to 1984, the Tactical Patrol Force had been the citywide response battalion for civil unrest and violence on city streets. Their members were handpicked for top physical strength and conditioning. When their rumbling buses arrived at riot scenes with platoons of crowd control sentries, trouble would soon disperse. 2 TPF members were killed in the line of duty. On foot patrol May 1st, 1964, Patrolman Edmund G. Schrempf and his partner stopped a suspicious vehicle on Pitkin Avenue in Brooklyn. When the patrolman reached through the window to secure the ignition keys, the driver floored the gas pedal. While being dragged with the speeding car, Patrolman Schrempf held on for 4.5 blocks before he fell beneath the wheels of the car and was fatally injured. Police Officer Thomas V. Pegues and his partner were on foot patrol assigned to vehicle safety checks on New York Boulevard on August 19, 1974, in the 103 precinct. They stopped a car containing 2 suspicious men and arrested the driver. Without warning, the passenger suspect pulled out a gun and shot the young TPF cop in the back, killing him instantly. Both suspects were later arrested. Officer Pegues was a U.S. Marine Vietnam combat veteran. The former Street Crime Unit, world-renowned for their decoy techniques and vigilant innovations, was perhaps best known for their crime-fighting slogan, "We own the night." 4 Street Crime Unit members were shot and killed while confronting dangerous criminals. Detective Horace Lee Ford died on November 6, 1978, from gunshot wounds he received when he challenged an armed bank robber. The detective was off-duty in the Manufacturers Bank on Casino Boulevard in Flushing. The gunman died in the gutter just outside the bank doorway, where he had fled after being hit by Detective Ford's bullets. On February 12, 1980, Harlem's legendary 2-8 precinct had been all too familiar to police officer Robert J. Bilodeau and his partner. Ever vigilant street cops, they stopped their unmarked car to investigate 6 suspicious men. But suddenly one of the men reached for a gun. The gunman bolted down a narrow alleyway. Officer Bilodeau gave chase, but the officer was shot as numerous gunshots exchanged. He later died at Harlem Hospital. The suspect was shot in the gunfight, but escaped and was arrested later, seeking treatment at the Mount Vernon Hospital. He was sent to prison for 25 years to life. A warrior, second to none, Police Officer Bilodeau was posthumously awarded his 2nd Medal of Honor. His first Medal of Honor was received after surviving a near-fatal knife attack just the previous year, in which his throat was slashed by a madman. Detective Abraham Walton was shot and killed on July 14, 1980, when he interrupted a social club robbery while off duty. 3 armed suspects entered, pointing handguns, and announced a holdup. The gunmen forced the patrons to the floor, demanding their money and jewelry. But when the robbers began beating the victims, Detective Walton drew his pistol, shouted "Police!" and ordered the suspects down. Outnumbered 3 to 1, gunshots exploded. The detective was hit 4 times, and the robbers fled with his gun. Detective Walton was taken to the hospital, but his wounds proved fatal. On a dark Bronx boulevard the night of March 14, 1996, police officer Gillespie and his partner stopped a luxury automobile which was hijacked. As the officers approached the car, the suspects opened fire. 1 bullet struck Officer Gillespie in the shoulder above his body armor and deflected internally. He died at nearby St. Barnabas Hospital. Officer Gillespie's partner pursued the suspects in a running gun battle down the Grand Concourse. 1 gunman was shot 5 times and another was arrested at the scene, later committing suicide in jail by hanging. Officer Gillespie, a U.S. Marine combat veteran, was given a hero's burial in Long Island National Cemetery. Established in 1929, the aviation unit first began flying fixed-wing airplanes, but from 1948 until today, they patrol high above us in helicopters. They are the New York PD's Air Force, and they fly everywhere, from police surveillance to ground unit backup to air-sea rescues to major catastrophes. And now we remember how 6 members lost their lives in 3 fatal flights. 4 days before Christmas in 1967, high above ice-clad waters near the Manhattan Bridge, Patrolmen Plato B. Arvanitis and George H. Bishop were both killed when their NYPD helicopter fell from the sky without a moment's warning. The patrolmen were flying traffic surveillance when a catastrophic engine failure caused their aircraft to lose power and impact the frozen East River. The underwater search for Patrolman Bishop, found still strapped in his seat, had endured for 3 long months. It was just an everyday surveillance flight for Patrolman Patrick Harrington and Joseph T. Maracanda, flying high against the powder blue cloudless sky over Queens. It was the 1st of March in 1970. But in an unforgiving heartbeat, the helicopter partners would be killed when their Bell aircraft suffered an instant engine failure and crashed to destruction on a quiet neighborhood street outside a row of single-family houses. Police officer and instructor pilot James P. Rowley, with his observer, Police Officer Charles J. Trojan, were killed on a hot and hazy summer morning on July 22, 1983, when their police helicopter was struck in mid-air collision with a seaplane in the sky above Buttermilk Channel off Governor's Island. The plane collided with the tail rotor of the helicopter, sending it crashing through the roof of an empty warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront, into which Officer Rowley had courageously steered to avoid a row of private homes. 2 of the 4 passengers on the plane also perished. In 2015, in response to the escalating rash of terrorist incidents worldwide, the NYPD took action to prepare for a mass attack in New York City and transformed the citywide task forces to become the new Strategic Response Group. The citywide unit was trained and equipped to augment existing tactical readiness and is now deployed in high-profile assignments at strategic locations in maximum visibility. 8 members of these commands sacrificed their lives. 6 were assigned to the former borough task forces, and 2 were assigned to the new Strategic Response Group. 3 of the 8 fatalities were in street encounters and 5 were as a result of 9/11 illness. On March 3, 1989, plainclothes police officer Robert Machadi was fatally shot in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn after he and his partner approached a group of men who appeared to be having a dispute. A struggle ensued. One of the suspects gained control of the officer's .38 caliber revolver and shot him once in the abdomen. The suspect fled but was later apprehended and charged with murder. Officer Machadi was survived by his wife, who was 6 months pregnant at the time of his death. Off-duty police officer Gary C. Coe was stabbed to death on November 11, 1989, by a male who had just been involved in a motor vehicle accident. Officer Coe had identified himself as a police officer, but the suspect advanced aggressively and stabbed the officer 3 times in the chest and twice in the leg with a 4-inch utility knife. The suspect also slashed Officer Coe's companion across the hand when she tried to intervene. Officer Coe was taken to Lutheran Medical Center, where he died 1 hour later. The suspect was later arrested. On April 27, 1994, police officer Jose A. Perez was on patrol when members of the 78th Precinct Anti-Crime Team called for assistance as they pursued 6 robbery suspects. While en route to the urgent backup, Officer Perez's patrol vehicle collided with another patrol car that had also rushed to the call. Officer Perez was taken to Methodist Hospital, where he died from his injuries. They are the NYPD Navy. They protect 146 square miles of water and guard 576 miles of coastline. The Harbor Unit, formerly named the Marine Division, takes to the oceans, rivers, and waterways of New York City every day and every night, be those waters calm, stormy, icy, or threatened by evildoers. We remember how 12 Harbor Unit members lost their lives in the performance of waterborne service. Patrolling the swift and powerful tides of the Hellgate Rapids on March 10, 1917, Patrolman DeForest Fredenberg and John Lober perished when their NYPD harbor launch was totally demolished by a speeding tugboat. Late one fall afternoon on November 19, 1919, a harbor launch departed Randall's Island to patrol the Harlem River. But as the sky grew darker near the 130th Street Bridge, a tugboat crew found the police boat had capsized in the river and discovered that Marine Division Patrolman James Hughes and John McIntyre had drowned. Sergeant Neil Gibbons and Patrolman John J. McGlynn were injured fatally after their police launch exploded on October 15, 1924 on the East River. Just after refueling, a sudden fire and powerful explosion hurled both of the Marine Division officers into the river. Patrolman Harold Conway of the Marine Division drowned in the ice-laden East River near Hard Island on a frigid January 31st in 1931. While completing his hourly rounds, which included dangerous ladders and ledges, he entered the unforgiving sub-freezing water. When he failed to return, his 2 partners attempted to locate him. His body was found in the river 4 hours later. On Easter Sunday, April 10, 1950, Patrolman Louis Balzano walked across the 39th Street ferry slip in Brooklyn to make his hourly ring. But the planks on the decaying pier gave way, and the patrolman fell through, struck his head, and disappeared underwater. His brother officers dove into the bay to save him, but Patrolman Balzano could not be revived. Both his son and grandson would follow in New York PD careers of their own. Patrolman John F. Polarolo was investigating a vehicle accident on the Triborough Bridge on July 20, 1964, when he was fatally struck by a hit-and-run driver. His partner, Patrolman Dwyer, apprehended the escaping driver. The winter East River waters off Pier 44 on February 11, 1966, found Patrolman Stanley Butch with his team placing a grappling hook on a submerged auto from their rowboat. But Patrolman Butch was swept into the river by the frigid tides. He was removed to the water's edge, treated by a doctor, but the patrolman's life had been lost. On October 13, 1970, Patrolman Maurice J. Urban, stationed on the deck of Launch 4 on the East River, next to Pier 10, had been struggling to recover a human body from the water. But when an unexpected current slammed the launch into the pier, Patrolman Urban was fatally crushed against the pilings. As a third-generation rookie on patrol in Brooklyn, police officer Kenneth Michael Hansen followed in the footsteps of his father, Detective John Hansen Sr. of the Harbor Unit, and his grandfather, NYPD Patrolman Michael Harrigan. On June 11, 1991, Officer Hansen became missing while performing the role of a victim in the water during an air-sea rescue training exercise in the river off Battery Park. After an intense search, his body was recovered the following day. Detective Hansen Sr.'s other son, police officer John Hansen Jr., also a member of the Harbor Unit, participated in the search for his brother Kenny. 10 years would pass, and the NYPD canine named Hansen would alert his handler to the remains of ESU Sergeant Mike Curtin at Ground Zero. Their commands are still called troops because their history and traditions are deeply and honorably bound to the original U.S. Cavalry. The NYPD Mounted Unit, the largest and oldest in the nation, has been in existence since 1858, ever since the horse was the primary mode of transportation. They are traditionally known as the 10-foot cops. We remember 16 members of this legendary unit who were killed in the performance of mounted duty. 12 officers were on horseback and had taken police action, both criminally related and in life rescue emergencies, from atop their magnificent steeds. 3 were felled by gunshots, and 1 death was from 9/11 illness. Patrolman Thomas R. McIntyre, end of watch September 23, 1896. Roundsman Oscar Reinhardt, end of watch April 24, 1897. Patrolman John E. Hoey, end of watch October 4, 1901. Patrolman Artemus L. Fish, end of watch May 9, 1909. Patrolman William H. Galbraith, end of watch November 8, 1911. Patrolman John Mee, end of watch July 15, 1914. Sergeant Thomas F. J. O'Grady, end of watch August 24, 1916. Patrolman Christopher J. Tierney, end of watch September 20th, 1919. Patrolman Gustav August Boger, Jr., end of watch July 13, 1922. Patrolman Francis J. Mace, end of watch December 11, 1922. Patrolman Patrick Fahey, end of watch February 12, 1928. Patrolman William O'Connor, end of watch May 19, 1931. Patrolman James I. Young, end of watch February 12, 1936. Sergeant Joseph E. Curtis, end of watch May 12, 1944. Patrolman Philip Fitzpatrick, end of watch May 26, 1947. Since the police emergency mission was first organized in 1925 and then officially designated the Emergency Service Division on April 10, 1930, today's ESU averages over 100,000 calls a year and lives up to its challenge. Anytime, baby, with extraordinary training, expert skills, specialized equipment, and a can-do attitude that is without equal. 39 members of the service lost their lives in the performance of duty. 16 members in 14 incidents, 14 members on the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, and 9 members from illness related to 9/11 recovery services. Patrolman William A. Curtin with Emergency Squad 1 responded to a fire at 330 East 72nd Street in the early morning of July 28, 1929. As the rescue truck crossed Fifth Avenue, it collided broadside with a bus rushing across 46th Street. 7 passengers on the bus were injured, and 4 patrolmen were ejected from the truck. Patrolman Curtin was rushed to Polyclinic Hospital, where he died from his injuries. Before a winter sunrise on February 1, 1935, Sergeant George Nadler responded with Emergency Squad 13 to a gas leak at a furniture store at Hoyt and Livingston Streets in Brooklyn. While investigating the escaping gas, the building exploded and a massive sidewalk canopy collapsed, crushing and instantly killing Sergeant Nadler underneath. In New Brighton, Staten Island, on August 11, 1937, a row of houses was flooded by torrential rains, and the water-soaked buildings began collapsing from the heavy deluge. Patrolman Joseph J. McBreen, Emergency Squad 10, responded and quickly crafted a ladder bridge from a nearby window. Then he crawled across and into the collapse to rescue a 4-year-old girl who was trapped inside. But the heroic rescue attempt proved fatal. Patrolman McBreen, with the little girl's body still clutched in his arms, were both recovered hours later. 18 other residents had also perished. It was on the 9th of June in 1939 when Patrolman Alexander C. Stutt, with his Emergency Squad 12 team, had responded to 13th Avenue in Brooklyn, where a refrigerator was leaking deadly ammonia fumes. The officers carried the refrigerator downstairs to the street, where Patrolman Stutt collapsed and died. Speeding to a high-pressure gas leak on November 25, 1946, Emergency Squad 17 arrived at a residence on the Grand Central Parkway in the 103 precinct. They discovered a utility worker overcome by fumes as they attempted to stop the deadly gas leak. But then, while giving oxygen to the worker, a powerful explosion demolished the entire building. Killed instantly were Patrolman Peter J. Knudsen and Francis M. O'Hara, along with the repairman. Lieutenant Charles R. Mitchie, in a heroic effort to save his patrolman, collapsed and was rushed to Queens General Hospital, but his life was also lost. Sergeant Paul F. Rashke, who suffered severe injury from the blast, miraculously survived. Patrolman Charles A. Brereton, Jr., the Squad 12 chauffeur on September 30, 1947, had returned from an emergency and backed his truck into quarters. With the door open to observe progress, he collapsed, slipped from the cab, and became pinned under the truck's wheels. Despite immediate treatment by a passing doctor, Patrolman Brereton's life could not be saved. On April 19, 1963, Patrolman Kenneth L. Kozier, Emergency Squad 3, with officers from the 4-2 precinct, carried a man on a stretcher from the 153rd Street subway station to the street after he was removed from the tracks where his foot was trapped. Shortly afterward, Patrolman Kozier suffered a heart attack and did not recover. On April 15, 1968, while lifting heavy equipment in the emergency service garage, Patrolman John R. Banks, Squad 9, suffered a fatal heart attack. He was transported to Jamaica Hospital, where intensive life-saving efforts failed. The urgent radio call, request for oxygen, man in a sewer, came on the morning of October 2, 1969. Arriving in minutes at the Troy Avenue and Eastern Parkway in the 7-7 precinct, Patrolman Salvatore Spinola and David Hayes of Emergency Squad 8 found the utility worker unconscious inside an underground sewer tunnel. Patrolman Spinola immediately donned a safety mask and dropped down into the hole to rescue the worker. But upon reaching him, the patrolman was also overcome by deadly methane fumes. Backup officers and equipment converged, and Patrolman Hayes followed his partner down into the sewer to hoist him out. Patrolman Spinola was rushed to Unity Hospital. The fearless rescuer's life was lost. It was Thanksgiving Eve in 1971. The streets in Brooklyn were bone cold, dark, and rain-soaked. Patrolman Patrick O'Connor, filling in from Truck 1 with Patrolman Maurice Fitzgerald, Emergency Squad 6, became Adam 6, partners on patrol. On the Gowanus Expressway near 55th Street, they came upon a disabled vehicle and lit up their roof lights to protect the passengers. But then, without warning, their REP was violently struck from the rear by a speeding oil tanker truck, launching the emergency cops 200 feet from the point of impact. Pinned in the wreckage, both officers were removed and rushed to Luther Medical Center. Patrolman Fitzgerald barely survived serious injury. Patrolman O'Connor did not. 2 police generations followed the family tradition. Patrolman O'Connor's son, Patrick, and his grandson, Patrick, would each share the honor as proud NYPD members. An icy winter snow flurried that Friday afternoon in Brooklyn on January 19th, 1973, when four men with guns entered John and Al's sporting goods store on Broadway in the 90 precinct to commit armed robbery. With the robbers still inside, a gun battle erupted with responding patrol officers, and a hostage situation developed. Emergency service officers wearing tactical body armor and equipped with special weapons established a perimeter around the store, but soon more gunfire exploded from inside, and Patrolman Stephen R. Gilroy, Emergency Squad 8, positioned behind a subway pillar across the street from the gun store, was shot. The officer was rescued from the line of fire by his ESU brothers and transported to Kings County Hospital, but his wounds proved fatal. On that Sunday, 47 hours later, after 14 hostages staged a bold and daring escape to the rooftop, the four gunmen meekly surrendered. For over 3 hours, emergency service and the hostage negotiating team held a tight perimeter on Mulford Avenue in the 4-5 precinct, where on September 29, 1983, an emotionally disturbed male was barricaded in a residence, armed with a shotgun. Meanwhile, police officer Joseph P. McCormick had returned to Squad 2 quarters in Harlem after a morning court appearance. Upon learning of the ongoing hostage situation, instead of ending his tour, he voluntarily responded to the Bronx scene. With Officer McCormick positioned next to a backyard tree to protect the hostage team, the gunman emerged to a rear deck and fired a shotgun blast at Officer McCormick. Although mortally wounded, the officer shouldered his shotgun and returned fire, collapsing, as another ESU officer shot and killed the suspect. Joe McCormick's two young sons, Joseph and Andrew, would eventually become proud members of their father's ESU. On a cold, dark winter night in 1987, police officer Francis LaSala rushed into a fire at an occupied apartment house near Squad 1 quarters. Donning an air pack, he rushed inside the burning building to awaken the sleeping residents. Fighting thick smoke and overwhelming heat, Officer LaSala advanced through the hallways and up the stairs, but then he was trapped in a fireball called a flashover, and the fallen officer was discovered unresponsive in the charred stairwell with his lost air pack alongside. With life-threatening burns, he was taken to Cornell Burn Center, where he died 5 days later on the 10th of January. The heroic efforts of Officer LaSala and his team allowed the lives of dozens of tenants to be saved. On January 31st, 2004, Sergeant Keith A. Ferguson, Emergency Squad 7, was on the Hercules team, a special anti-terrorism detail in Manhattan, when he heard a foot patrol officer's calls for help. Running to assist the officer who was arresting a suspect on Broadway and Grand Street, the sergeant collapsed. Sergeant Ferguson, the son of a retired NYPD police officer, Victor Ferguson, was taken to St. Vincent's Hospital, but his life could not be saved. Sergeant John Gerard Coughlin, Emergency Squad 4. Sergeant Michael Sean Curtin, Emergency Squad 2. Sergeant Rodney C. Gillis, Emergency Squad 8. Detective Joseph Vincent Vigiano, Emergency Squad 2. Police Officer John Delara, Emergency Squad 2. Police Officer Vincent G. Dans, Emergency Squad 3. Police Officer Jerome Mark Patrick Dominguez, Emergency Squad 3. Police Officer Stephen Patrick Driscoll, Emergency Squad 4. Police Officer Ronald Philip Clofer, Emergency Squad 7. Police Officer Thomas Michael Langone, Emergency Squad 10. Police Officer Brian Grady McDonnell, Emergency Squad 1. Police Officer Paul Talty, Emergency Squad 10. Police Officer Santos Valentin Jr., Emergency Squad 7. Police Officer Walter Edward Weaver, Emergency Squad 3. On a perfect crystal blue morning 19 Septembers ago, no one could have forewarned NYPD's darkest day, a day the unthinkable still haunts us, a day that changed our country and our world forever. On September 11, 2001, pure evil struck in the worst attack on American soil in history. 2 passenger airlines, hijacked by al-Qaeda terrorist cowards, were deliberately crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Facing catastrophic fires, powerful explosions, and sheer panic, members of NYPD scrambled to the call. As thousands of innocents tried to flee the deadly inferno, ESU rushed in. Rescue teams were deployed to the North and South Towers, but while guiding the terrified citizens to safety, tragedy struck again. One by one, the towers collapsed. Without warning, all of Lower Manhattan became covered in dust. The fires would burn 100 days. 2 million tons of rubble would fill the foundations. 23 NYPD officers died in the destruction, including 14 brave and heroic members of our beloved Emergency Service Unit. Over 25,000 innocent lives were led to safety. The 14 ESU heroes died as they lived. They sacrificed their own lives valiantly so that others could survive. We recall with resolve this vicious attack upon our lives and freedoms as we, the members of REMA, join hands and hearts with you, the families, friends, and active members of NYPD, in affirming that we will never forget the courage and strength of our lost heroes, and most importantly, the way in which they touched our lives. Let us once again renew our promise to remember the 14 members who perished, and who were so respected for their bravery and dedication that nothing less than 2 falling skyscrapers could have halted their mission. And to this day, our NYPD extended family continues to lose responders because of 9/11 illness, suffered by those who performed distinguished service for the department and the city that they so loved. Since serving at or in relation to Ground Zero operations, the following 15 members of the service have perished from toxic exposure. Police Officer Louise M. Johnston, Captain Barry Galfano, Lieutenant Christopher M. Pupo, Captain Dennis Morales, Sergeant Patrick P. Murphy, Detective Luis G. Fernandez, Deputy Chief Stephen Joseph Bonanno, Detective Ronald A. Richards, Police Officer Deborah A. Garbutt-Jeff, Police Officer William J. King, Deputy Chief James Gerard Malloy, Detective Christian R. Lindsay, Police Officer Gary Lee Koch, Police Officer Kenneth Xavier Domenech, Police Officer Thomas Waterman. This concludes the memorial roll call. On behalf of the fallen officers remembered today, it is our high honor to respectfully thank each one of you for keeping their sacrifice and memory alive. In the words of General John J. Pershing, time shall not diminish the glory of their deeds. May God bless the lost heroes of NYPD Special Operations. They gave all their tomorrows for our todays. And may God bless the United States of America.
Well, it don't cost a thing to bow your head and pray. Time don't take money, but we spend it anyway. Oh, it's all about the dream, and and the freedom to chase, but he knew his life might be the price to pay. He won't need a welcome home, he won't need no cheering crowd. It was worth the price alone, just to make his mama proud. And it takes more than a man to be all he can be. Oh, freedom made free. Preacher told Mama, said, I'm proud of your son. He made a promise that can't be undone. And she said, faith lives forever. And he was too young, but he made sure these colors never run. Now he won't need a welcome home, he won't need no cheering crowd. It was worth the price alone, just to make his mama proud. And it takes more than a man to be all he can be. Oh, freedom made free. It takes more than money, it takes more than change. As long as there's a light that burns inside, we will find a way. And they won't be forgotten, no, they won't die in vain. They fought for freedom, and that's where heroes are made. He won't need a welcome home, he won't need no cheering crowd. It was worth the price alone, just to make his country proud. And it takes more than a man